Have you ever wondered what's really lurking in the deepest, most unexplored corners of our world? For centuries, tales of a giant, ape-like creature have echoed through the mountains and forests of North America. We call it Bigfoot, Sasquatch, the gentle giant of the woods. But what if I told you that one of the most compelling pieces of evidence ever found was not a blurry photo or a giant footprint, but a baby, a small, helpless creature found all alone? This is the story of that baby, and the heartbreaking truth of why it was abandoned. Our story begins in the dense, fog-shrouded forests of the Pacific Northwest, a known hotspot for Bigfoot sightings. In the late 1990s, a group of experienced hikers, let's call them Mark and Sarah, were trekking deep into a remote valley, far from any marked trails. They were seasoned outdoors people, familiar with the sights and sounds of the wilderness. But on the third day of their expedition, they heard something that stopped them in their tracks. It wasn't the call of a bird or the rustle of a deer. It was a faint, whimpering cry, like that of a distressed infant. Cautiously, they followed the sound, pushing through thick ferns and ancient trees. The crying grew louder, more desperate. It led them to a small, musk-covered clearing, and there, huddled at the base of a massive redwood tree, was something that defied all explanation. It was a small, hairy creature, no bigger than a human toddler. It had large, dark eyes filled with fear and sadness, and it was shivering despite the mild afternoon. Its fur was a matted, dark brown, and it clutched a bundle of leaves to its chest. It looked directly at Mark and Sarah, its cries softening into a low, mournful whimper. It was, for all intents and purposes, a baby Bigfoot. Their first instinct was a mix of shock and disbelief. This was the stuff of legend, a creature from folklore, alive and breathing right in front of them. But their shock quickly gave way to concern. Where were its parents? A mother Sasquatch would never leave her young alone. The baby was clearly weak, dehydrated, and terrified. It was an orphan. Mark and Sarah knew they couldn't just leave it there to perish. They made the difficult decision to intervene. Slowly, carefully, they approached the small creature, speaking in soft, calm tones. They offered it some water from their canteen, which it hesitantly lapped up. They shared a piece of a fruit and nut bar, which it nibbled on with surprising delicacy. Over the next few hours, a fragile trust began to form. The baby, which they nicknamed Mossy because of where they found him, allowed them to get closer. They could see he was injured. A deep gash on his leg was festering and needed attention. They cleaned the wound as best they could with their first aid kit. The question still loomed. What happened here? Why was Mossy all alone? The hikers looked around the clearing for clues. They found them, and the story they told was a grim one. Not far from the redwood tree, they discovered signs of a massive struggle. The ground was torn up, small trees were snapped in half, and there were large, deep tracks everywhere much larger than Mossy's. Put alongside the giant Sasquatch prints were something else, something chillingly familiar. The tracks of a large grizzly bear. And then they saw it. Patches of dark fur, not Mossy's brown, but a deep black, snagged on broken branches, and drops of blood staining the forest floor. The scene painted a brutal picture. A grizzly bear, one of the forest's apex predators, had likely attacked Mossy's family. A mother Bigfoot, fiercely protective of her young, would have fought to the death to defend her baby. The evidence suggested she had done just that. The heartbreaking reality began to sink in. Mossy wasn't abandoned. He was a survivor. His mother, and possibly his entire family, had sacrificed themselves to save him from the bear. He had likely hidden during the chaos, and was left behind, injured and alone after the terrible fight. The hikers felt a profound sense of sadness. This mythical creature was suddenly very real, and its story was one of love, sacrifice, and tragic loss. They realized the whimpers they heard weren't just cries for food or water. They were cries of grief for a lost mother. Now, Mark and Sarah faced an impossible choice. What do you do with an orphan baby, Bigfoot? Taking him out of the forest could expose him to the world, turning him into a spectacle, a lab specimen. His life would be one of captivity. But leaving him in the wild, injured and alone, was a death sentence. He was too young to fend for himself. he wouldn't survive another night, let alone the coming winter. They decided on a middle path, a compassionate but risky compromise. They couldn't take him with them, but they couldn't abandon him either. They spent the next 2 days in the clearing with Mossy. They built him a small, insulated shelter using branches and leaves, reinforcing the den he was found near it. They gathered as many edible berries, roots, and soft plants as they could identify, creating a small stockpile of food for him. They left him a large supply of fresh water in containers. They treated his wound again, hoping it would be enough to prevent a serious infection. It was the best they could do. They were trying to give him a fighting chance, to honor the sacrifice his mother had made. The moment of their departure was agonizing. Mossy seemed to understand they were leaving. He let out a soft cry and reached for them with a small, hairy hand. It was a moment of connection that transcended species, a plea not to be left alone again. With heavy hearts, Mark and Sarah said their goodbyes and hiked away, deliberately not looking back. The sound of Mossy-esque cries echoing behind them until it was swallowed by the vast silence of the forest. For years, the story remained their secret, shared only with a handful of trusted cryptozoology researchers who studied it away from the public eye. They never revealed the exact location to protect it from becoming a circus. Many have asked, what happened to Mossy? Did he survive? The truth is, we don't know for sure. The hikers never returned, believing that was the most responsible course of action. However, some unconfirmed reports from the same remote region in the years that followed spoke of a young, solitary Sasquatch being spotted, smaller than an adult, often seen foraging near a distinctive, massive redwood tree. Could it have been Mossy? A survivor, carrying the memory of his family and the two strange, kind creatures who showed him compassion. This story, whether you believe it or not, challenges us to think about these legendary creatures in a new light, not as monsters or beasts, but as intelligent, emotional beings with family bonds, capable of love and sacrifice, just like us. It reminds us that the wilderness still holds profound mysteries, and that sometimes the most heartbreaking stories are the ones that are never fully told. The tale of the lone baby Bigfoot is a somber testament to the brutal, yet beautiful, circle of life in the hidden corners of our world. What do you think happened to Mossy? Do you believe he survived? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. The world is full of unexplained mysteries, and this is just one of them. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this story, be sure to like and subscribe for more journeys into the unknown. See you next time.